Now then, Vinyl Monkey back again, and this week I'm going to do, instead of a top 10, I've stretched it a bit. I've stretched it in fact by 3, and I'm going to do my top 30 album covers, starting in this part with 30 down to 16. And I was just going to kick off by reading a little bit off the back of this this lovely little book by David Hepworth, A Fabulous Creation, which is referring to the LP. And he says during that time, and the time he's talking about is actually the 67 to the early 80s, the LP became a mark of sophistication, an instrument of education, a poster saying the things you dare not say yourself, a means of attracting the opposite sex, and for many, the single most desirable object in their lives. Yeah, and it was a privilege to to live through that time, and I would have to accept that to some extent my fairly recently rediscovered love for the LP is partly to do with nostalgia for those times, but as well as the listening experience and the general experience. And a really important part of that experience is the actual album cover itself, the package. It's not just the cover, it's what's inside it, the ability to put inside it. It lends itself to it's a good size for photographs, for artwork, for lyrics. You can actually read them, and so yeah. This week and next week probably gonna look at my top 30, my favourite out of this collection of I don't know how many, 100, almost 1,000 I suppose LPs. What's my favourite top 30 covers? And I suppose that begs the question, what do you want from a cover? And that's an entirely subjective thing. I like to have a gatefold just because it doubles the sort of it doubles the potential for the album, but it's not essential. I like good photography, good design. The lyrics are nice usually, unless the lyrics are totally unimportant. There's the opportunity to put in other little gimmicks, photographs, sex posters, etc., which I'm less bothered about. But I think overall it's just the sort of feel that the cover gives you, and how that relates to the artist and to the music within, and the relationship between that. So there's a lot of dimensions to it. It's all entirely subjective, just a bit of fun. But here goes with my top 30. This is number 30 down to number 16. And my number 30 is, I've got some notes here as well, because there's lots of sort of photographers and designers whose names I'm not familiar with, but this is the Four Tops, Still Waters Run Deep. And it's a pretty simple cover. It's Tamla Motown. A lot of the Tamla and soul LPs generally are pretty low budget in terms of their packaging. But this is designed by a guy called Curtis McNair, who was a political activist in the civil rights movement, and he describes how the artwork he was most proud of was Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, and I would have had that in my top 30, but I've only got it on CD. And Marvin's other albums I don't think are as well designed as What's Going On. So I've got the Four Tops up here, and you've got this brilliant photograph of a sort of reflection of the Four Tops shimmering. I hope you can see it okay on that. So you couldn't possibly recognise them if the name wasn't there, but it's sort of standing on a dockside and it's the reflection in the water below. And then on the back you've got this sort of slightly out of focus, grainy black and white photograph again, where you couldn't possibly recognise the four members of the Four Tops. And I just think it's brilliant, and what it's saying to me is that there is much more depth, much more heft to the Four Tops than simply a sort of a sing-along, straight-ahead soul boy band. There's more about them, and that LP is starting to go into those areas. So yeah, I think it's a really good cover. Not so common great covers amongst the soul albums, but that's a good one. That's my number 30, the Four Tops, Still Waters Run Deep from 1970. My number 29, going from soul into country, and I think one of the things about an album cover is, you know, how it represents, how it makes the artist look, and this one just makes On Jennings. This is the countryside of On Jennings. He looks so cool. I just love the suit he's in. I love the pose he's in. The shirt under the suit, and I love the way that they've used the sort of slats on the side of the typical sort of American deep south sort of house, ranch or whatever, for the song titles to fit in between those slats. The back is nothing to write home about, but I think the front is just so cool, which I think On Jennings was for me. And so this one's designed by a guy called Tom Wilkes, who's designed many hundreds. I think must have been his main job, was being album covers. Many great albums, including George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. So On Jennings from 1970, my number 29. My number 28 and 27, I'm going on to the jazz, from soul to country to jazz, and I'm holding up two at once here because they're just both good examples of Blue Note records, and I've got, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 Blue Note records there, and they're all brilliant design. This is Shades of Red by the Freddie Red Quintet. And this is Out of the Blue by Sonny Red. No relation, spell red differently on each one. And these were both designed by a guy called Reed Miles, who designed, I don't know, maybe 500 plus albums for Blue Note. And they're all, just classic designs, in a way simple but hugely effective, usually only using 2-3 colours. Always on the back got some really good information, a write-up about the history of the artists, and interpret a little bit of analysis around each track on the album. The front usually, nearly always lists the sort of players on the album. And I hope you can see from these two, just absolutely classics. Inside, of course, you've got the iconic Blue Note label, and I think, you know, this guy, apparently Reed Miles, he was paid $50 a time for designing these Blue Note records, and they used to send him the record in advance so that he could use the sound of the record to influence his design. But he admitted he wasn't particularly a jazz fan. He used to prefer to rely on their written description of the music to do his designs, and they say they used to pay him $50 plus 2 copies of the LP, which apparently he always sold to the record shops or give away to friends. But they're beautiful, they're stylish, Blue Note records, and that's my number 28 and 27. There were some bands who I think paid more attention, or their record labels paid more attention to the album covers than others, and one of the bands that did pay good attention was the Groundhogs, the British blues band from the late 60s, early 70s, and their third LP, which was Who Will Save the World, the Mighty Groundhogs, was sort of a very elaborate sort of comic strip type album with the Groundhogs cast as comic strip characters who were environmental sort of superheroes trying to save the world from environmental disaster. But the one I'm holding up from the Groundhogs, I just love the look of this one and the feel of it, is Thank Christ for the Bomb, and apologies for the tape. This is my original copy from way back 1970. There are no credits on this as to who designed it. I just think it's a great design. Apparently the Pete Cruikshank there, the bass player, his picture's been superimposed onto an image that was taken from the Imperial War Museum. But I think this it's a simple cover, but it's very sort of evocative, and yeah, just links so well with the theme of the tracks on the album. So that's my number 26, the Groundhogs, Thank Christ for the Bomb. My number 25 is Charles Wright and Watt Street Band, You're So Beautiful. And the reason I've picked this is just for its simplicity. It's just a picture of the band on a beach there with you can hardly differentiate the sea from the sky, and yeah, it's the simplicity and the straightforwardness. And inside is just a sort of monochrome image of the band and the basic information about the album down the side. I think it's just a beautiful cover. It's designed by a guy called Ed Thrasher, who also designed one of my favourite albums of all time, Astral Weeks, as it happens. But yeah, lovely. Charles Wright and the Watt Street Band, my number 25. My number 24, just turn these notes over, is Little Feet, Sailing Shoes, which is a painting by a guy called, a painting that was commissioned for this. He did commissions for mainly American rock stars, Beach Boys, Zappa. This is for Little Feet. There's a guy who renamed himself Neon Park. I've forgotten what his original name was. But this is basically a cake swinging on a tree that's sort of made up of horses' legs and hooves, with a giant snail in the front there, and then a little Mick Jagger dressed in blue, Little Boy Blue, but that's Mick Jagger for some reason stood on the side. And then on the inside cover some photos of the band and the lyrics and track information, who played on what track and everything. And it's just an example of using an interesting surreal artist to convey the music. And I think it links with I think where Little Feet were at and the feel of this album. So I've got that down as my number 24, Little Feet, Sailing Shoes from 1972. My number 23 is again a simple design. This is Wilco's Sky Blue Sky. Hang on, sorry, I've got that upside down. That's it. Sky Blue Sky, and the sort of, unfortunately this isn't a gatefold, but the photo does wrap around and finish there, and inside there's quite a nice lyric sheet and sort of some photos of the band, etc. So I always like a gatefold to open up, but this isn't one, but it's a great photo, I think. And I think the reason why I've got this one so low in my top 30 is that what they've used here is a photo that was sort of already in circulation, so they haven't commissioned this photo or taken this photo for this album. This is actually a photo by a guy called Manuel Presti, called Starlings Over Rome, and he specialised in sort of nature photography. He actually won Wildlife Photographer of the Year 2015, 2005, sorry, 2 years before this was released, for this series of starling murmuration photos. So yeah, it's nice, I like it, but that's my number 23, Wilco, Sky Blue Sky. My number 22 is Tom Waits, Blue Valentine. This is Tom Waits looking, I think, at his most cinematic, and I often think of Tom Waits in sort of cinematic terms, and I think it just evokes the sort of sleazy nighttime underbelly of American society that sort of Tom Waits inhabits in many of his songs. And the colours here and the sort of just gorgeous, and evoke that idea. It's designed by a guy called Ron Corro. He's done hundreds of albums, including Blood on the Tracks, the Dylan album, which I think is a lovely cover as well. And that's my number 22, Tom Waits, Blue Valentine. Yeah. My number 21 is one by Jack Bruce. Just after his, a couple of years after Cream broke up from, I think, 1971. Yeah, 1971. This is called Harmony Row, and on the front cover is Jack Bruce and some kids in a tenement block in Glasgow, close to where he was brought up. And it was actually called Harmony Row. It was the longest unbroken block of tenements in Europe, I think, over a mile long, this row of tenements. And that photograph spans across the front and back, but inside you've got sort of use of a separate sheet. So there you've got all the lyrics and a couple of good photographs, and on this one you've got this photograph of the back of Jack Bruce sitting on a sort of sand dune somewhere, which to me, it could be anywhere, but to me it looks like it's California or something like that, and I think it sort of shows how how far Jack Bruce has come, I suppose, from the tenements of Glasgow to the beaches of California. And yeah, I think it's a good cover, well designed. Yeah, and that's my number 21. My number 20 is Iggy Pop, The Idiot. I remember seeing Iggy when he was just launching this album, absolutely brilliant. The Idiot, the title of the album, is based on Dostoevsky's novel, which I think Iggy and Bowie, who we collaborated with on this album, and we're familiar with and we're into. But the pose, which I think sums up sort of Iggy as this sort of outsider, other sort of being, and it sums up the sort of mood of the album, is based on a painting by a guy called Erich Heckel, German, I think, called Rock I Roll. And it got Iggy to pose like the painting, and actually Bowie used a very, very similar sort of pose and design for his subsequent album Heroes. But I think that perfectly sums up both Iggy at that period and the mood of this album, and the lyrics are on the back. It's a simple cover, no gatefold, but that's my number 20, Iggy Pop, The Idiot. My number 19 is Peter Parrot, How the West Was Won, and I just think these are absolutely brilliant photographs. Unusually this one opens up that way, so it's just a back view silhouette of Peter Parrot with the song titles there. This is from 2017, so it's a recent one. And inside, again, another superb, moody sort of photo of Parrot there. And these are photographs by a guy called Steve Gullick, who is photographed. He's a rock star, sort of rock photographer. He's photographed Lou Reed, Nirvana. He's famous for photographing them, Patti Smith. If you go on his website, you see loads and loads of brilliant photographs for sale. And in here, there's this is one of the albums that has a beautiful insert, which is, it's got some more photographs of Parrot and the band, but then it's got all the lyrics in Parrot's own handwriting, and I just think that's, yeah, he's quite a neat writer, but it's a really nice personal touch, and yeah, it's not cheap to do these things. I think people don't have to, but I think it's nice when they do. It's a nice thing to sit and hold and read while you listen to the album. So that's my number 19, Peter Parrot, How the West Was Won. My number 18, I've talked about this before, as a great album, Season of Glass by Yoko Ono. This is Yoko's own photographs, one on the front, and it's John's glasses on a windowsill and a glass of water overlooking a sort of out of focus Central Park, and on the back just stepping back from the window, and the same sort of view. The lyrics are simply printed on the inside on the record sleeve, and I just think it's just so poignant. I could look at this album sleeve for for ages. It's absolutely beautiful. And there's a little poem by Yoko on the back as well. So, you know, there's Yoko's photography, Yoko's poetry, Yoko's album inside. The poignancy of this came out just after John Lennon's death, and all in all, yeah, just a great cover for a great album. So that's Yoko Ono's Season of Grass. My number 17 is a band called the Blackbirds, birds spelled B-Y-R-D-S, not because they were like the American Birds, but it's named after Donald Byrd, the jazz trumpeter who was their teacher, and these guys were all at Howard University. And it reminds me a little bit the sort of poses of the sort of Beatles in their Help phase, and it's just 6 photographs by a guy called Tony Lane, who worked with Simon and Garfunkel, the Rolling Stones and others, so he was a seasoned sort of rock and album cover photographer, and it's called Flying Star, and it's just the band running along a runway, an airport runway, and he's caught them as they run along. Very, very simple, but I think very effective. It captures the sort of exuberance of the record within, and I just like the cover. And inside, using all the space for another great photograph and some information on the background of the band and the tracks, etc. So that's the Blackbirds, Flying Star, my number 17. And then finally in this part 1, my number 16 is a bit of a classic, Black Sabbath, Paranoid from 1970. This is a picture of a man he's meant to look like a pig. I don't think he does particularly. He looks, I don't know, he looks possibly Oriental, Asian, but he's maybe looks more pig-like on that one, Waving a Sword, and that's because the title of this album was, right up until just before it came out, was going to be War Pigs, which is the opening track, and that's how that photograph was designed. But right at the last minute, the record company decided to change the name of the album to Paranoid, partly because, for 2 reasons I think, partly because they thought War Pigs might offend the American buyers because this was released, the Vietnam War was still raging, protests were going on. They didn't want to offend the